Interest in Star Wars Jedi 3 has accelerated sharply in the last few months, not because of an official announcement from EA or Respawn, but because a convergence of leaks, insider reports, and shifting release calendars have made the project hard to ignore. Multiple industry sources, including those cited by outlets like Gaming Bible and active rumor communities, are increasingly confident the game is targeting a 2026 release window. These aren't speculative whispers, they're coming from people tracking internal development timelines and approximate certification periods. What makes the chatter around Jedi 3 unusual isn't just that it exists, but how specific many of the details have become. Whereas earlier rumors were vague, a sequel is in development. More recent reports delve into setting, tone, mechanics, and narrative direction in ways that suggest the project is well into development and potentially nearing milestones where leaks are harder to contain. Also keep in mind, everything you see on screen is not gameplay from the new game, as we do not have any footage to share yet. The starting point for much of this discussion is the expectation that Jedi 3 will be significantly larger in scope than its predecessors. Both Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Jedi Survivor were notable for their tight narrative focus and structured progression, but also for relatively contained world design by modern open world standards. The leaks surrounding Jedi 3 point toward a departure from that model. Several community leaks, including posts on Reddit's Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, name a variety of new worlds that Respawn is allegedly building for the game. These aren't placeholders or cutscene arenas, they're full regions with distinct biomes, traversal systems, and environmental storytelling, with multiple major planet hubs rather than a single narrative spine with optional side areas that would mark a tangible shift toward scale. Equally notable in these leaks is the reported story direction. Jedi 3 is being described as darker, more mature, and more brutal in tone than its predecessors, whereas Fallen Order and Survivor balance dark themes with moments of levity and hope. Recent reports suggest the next chapter pushes the narrative into genuinely high stakes. The rumored antagonist picture is especially interesting. Multiple leaks reference a new villain or threat faction that isn't merely a rehash of previous Empire or Remnant forces. Instead, there are mentions of a group with philosophical or metaphysical motivations tied to the Force itself. Force abilities, always a central element of the Jedi series, are also said to be expanding. Recent community sources state Jedi 3 may introduce new force paths beyond what we've seen before, blending telekinetic combat, environment manipulation, and sensory or perception-based powers that alter how players engage with both enemies and terrain. There's no official documentation on this, but the consistency of talk about expanded force mechanics across multiple independent sources lends the idea weight. Combat itself is rumored to feel heavier, more reactive, and more intense. Instead of rigid combo windows or scripted set pieces, Respawn is reportedly experimenting with enemy AI that adapts to player tactics, requiring players to vary their approach rather than defaulting to familiar rhythms. That meshes with the reported tonal shift, a darker narrative paired with more serious, unpredictable engagements rather than the more choreographed combat of prior titles. The timeline leaks gain additional credibility when cross-referenced with broader EA release planning information. Several industry insiders, including the one referenced by Gaming Bible, have pointed to a 2026 launch window, possibly in the first half of the year. That aligns with Respawn's own hiring patterns, promotional lead time, and the cadence EA typically follows for major Star Wars titles. While none of this has been confirmed, the amount of overlapping detail across sources is noteworthy. New worlds, expanded force systems, a more serious narrative tone, and an antagonistic threat that goes beyond Remnant factions all point toward a sequel that intends to be more than just Survivor with more levels. It's also worth looking at context. Respawn has grown significantly as a studio since Fallen Order. They've shown a willingness to experiment with both narrative pacing and mechanical evolution, especially in response to player feedback around Survivor. That suggests Jedi 3 may be more than iterative, it could be evolutionary. At the same time, caution remains necessary. This is Respawn working within the Star Wars franchise, a universe with vast fan expectations and corporate oversight. Darker tone and mature themes are fine in concept, but execution becomes the question. Star Wars has always walked a line between mythic morality and accessible adventure. There's also the broader industry context. EA EA has been cautious with large Star Wars releases since the backlash against their monetization strategies a few years back. While Jedi 3 is unlikely to carry microtransactions tied to core gameplay, the pressure to make it a commercial hit, not just a critical one, is real. That can shape design decisions in ways that aren't always E-rated. Still, the details leaking out suggest a project with serious ambition. For the first time in the series' lifespan, Jedi 3 might be positioned as a truly headline Star Wars game, something that stands alongside major franchise entries, not beside them. If Respawn succeeds in delivering multiple massive worlds, expanded force systems, a darker narrative, and a novel antagonist, this could reshape expectations for what a Star Wars single-player action game can be. Not every leak will hold up, and story direction can shift dramatically in development, but the pattern of rumors suggests a far larger, far more serious undertaking than anything in the Jedi sub-series so far. For fans of the franchise, that's a reason to pay attention, but it's also a reason to stay measured. Ambition in leaks doesn't always translate to execution, especially in a universe as tightly controlled as Star Wars. The project may well evolve in ways that differ from early reports. If it arrives on the rumored schedule, has the potential to be the biggest Star Wars game Respawn has made yet, not just in scale but in narrative prominence and thematic weight. Whether it lives up to that potential will be one of the biggest stories in gaming over the next year. Jedi 3 looks positioned to capitalize on that trust in a way the series hasn't before. If the leaks are accurate, this won't just be another chapter in Cal Kestis' journey, but a turning point where the scale of the story finally matches the ambition of the mechanics. A darker tone, more serious threats, and expanded force abilities suggest a game willing to let consequences linger rather than resetting after each mission. The rumored expansion of worlds is especially promising when viewed through Respawn's design philosophy. Their planets have never been about sheer size for its own sake. They've focused on density, traversal flow, and environmental storytelling. If Jedi 3 truly introduces multiple large regions with distinct identities, that could create a rhythm closer to a true galactic journey rather than a linear sequence of stops. There's also the question of villain design, which has quietly been one of Respawn's strengths. Trilla and Dagan Gera weren't just obstacles, they were narrative anchors. The idea that Jedi 3 introduces a new antagonist or faction tied more deeply to the nature of the Force itself suggests a story that's willing to explore Star Wars beyond familiar Empire versus Rebellion framing. That's where the franchise tends to thrive when it's at its best. From a gameplay perspective, expanded force mechanics could finally allow players to feel like a fully realized Jedi rather than someone constantly rebuilding power. Survivor took steps in that direction with stances and deeper combat systems. Jedi 3 reportedly pushes that further, giving players more agency in how they approach encounters, exploration, and problem solving. If Respawn leans into that without overcomplicating things, the result could be the most satisfying Jedi power fantasy yet. The 2026 release window also works in the game's favor. It gives Respawn time to respond to feedback from Survivor, particularly around performance, pacing, and balance. It also places Jedi 3 firmly in the current console generation, avoiding the compromises that often come with cross-gen development. That alone increases the likelihood of a more polished launch. There's reason to be excited because Respawn has already shown restraint where it matters. The Jedi series hasn't chased live service trends, it hasn't leaned on aggressive monetization, and it hasn't tried to stretch itself into something it isn't. If that philosophy holds, Jedi 3 could arrive as a rare example of a big-budget Star Wars game built around narrative and player experience first. At the same time, caution still applies. Star Wars is a massive brand, and brand expectations have a way of shaping creative decisions. Drop a like on the video right now for more news on this game and subscribe to stay tuned.